Hi everyone, this is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. Welcome to this episode, everyone. My guest this week is Moira Gorski. And I always say that slow because I don't want to mess up anybody's name. So there we go. Moira and I have a mutual acquaintance that someone... she reached out to me and said, Moira would be great for your podcast. She read some of my book and that's why we're talking today. So I don't know a ton about you. I know that you are a retired nurse, you are a wellness expert, and you are a podcaster like myself. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's jump in with what you do now. And did you always see yourself with the career you have now? So you're a retired nurse. So obviously you have to deliberately go to school to be a nurse.
Right.
So how did that come about? So I want to be a nurse and then I think I want to do something else after. Well, how did that all play out?
Yeah, I think that I was always interested in medicine when I was growing up, and not to date myself, and I'm not sure how old you are yourself, but I mean, there was that show, what was called Emergency or something.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. I'm in my early 50s. So I'm 51.
Yeah, as I am, I'm 57. And so, we used to watch that. And even though I remember kind of getting like a weird pit in my stomach at night when I would watch that, sometimes I always wanted to watch that. So I think I was always interested in some type of maybe medicine. Certainly I became kind of a chemistry geek in high school. I really liked that. Mm-hmm. And then my mother, she volunteered a lot and did things like that. And so I think I wanted to serve others or help other people, something like that. And I wasn't really sure when I went off to college what I wanted to do with that interest in science. And I also had some interest in music. I played the piano since I was 5. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do something with that. But I went to a small liberal arts school and followed one of my sisters there and started to take my classes and be in college and things like that. And again, was kind of undecided. I was kind of a chemistry major, but the school that I was at was starting a nursing program, and they were doing it in conjunction with another small liberal arts school. And so I got interested in that. And I thought, well, maybe that's something that I can do, because I didn't want to be in a lab all day. That's what I thought like chemistry people did. And I didn't want to be pre-med because I thought that's way too long of a road. I didn't want to do that. So I entered into nursing, and I did a couple of like internships with my schooling, and really fell into rehab nursing, like working with people that have had strokes or paraplegics, quadriplegics. And so I was able to get a job in there here in Chicago at a wonderful rehab hospital after school. And so, again, I don't know if I necessarily had that, like, Florence Nightingale thought all growing up, but it really felt good that I wanted to, again, help people. And I loved being able to, I just loved rehab nursing. And
that's so cool. I love that you had, when you were watching that TV show when you were young, same thing would happen to me. When you see things and you're like something in your stomach, which is like butterflies, a pit, but like not a bad pit, a thing like that's exciting to me. And I'm not really sure why. And then when we're little, we're not really told to say, like, when that thing happens, to tell people about it. We're just kind of like, what was that? You don't know what it is. You can't really articulate it. But I love that it got you excited, and then you kept exploring what are those things, and knowing like, okay, medicine, doctor, that's way too long of a path. This other thing, that's too, like, I like that you were already evaluating it when you were younger. That's cool. That's, I don't know how common that is, but that's a cool thing.
Yeah, well, and I remember talking to my dad in college too, because I've learned to appreciate this later in my life, that I like to write, and I like to talk too. That's where I think became a podcaster. But I do, if you follow me on social media, I do some blog posts or posts things that I like to write, and and write about the meaning of things and whatnot. And so I talked to him about, and my dad was a journalist. And so I remember talking to him about communications and like, would I go into communications and be a journalist? And that didn't, I was like, nah. And I liked piano, but I was like, I don't want to do piano performance. So again, I kind of fell on that nursing. And, you know, I graduated, had a wonderful job, and was also young and sometimes not always thinking correctly, but you know, I worked in nursing. I say that because I worked in nursing for a couple of years, and then I was like, oh, I think I want to do something different. But I stayed within the medical field, and I ended up a couple of small company type of jobs in medical sales, but then landed in a really great job in medical sales, medical consulting as a nurse consultant for a company that manufactures hospital beds and furniture and distributes specialty beds. And so I finished my career off I was still in the hospital, but I was in a different role in that kind of nurse consultant, medical consultant. And I really enjoyed that because I had my own thing. And as we'll talk about what I've landed on to now, I started to see that I liked my own territory. I like to be able to work, you know, on my own but with a company type of thing. And I did enjoy that and got a little bit of a taste of having my own type of business.
That's cool. It's cool that you saw that there were other things you could use nursing for, or other career types and other roles other than just like the standard, I'm going to be a nurse and I'm going to work in a doctor's office or a hospital. There's so many other things you can do with that. I especially know because I used to work for a healthcare IT company, and I used to train doctors and clinicians and IT people on the electronic health record software. So yeah, there were so many avenues that nurses could, but if it was traditional for you and we grew up, you know, this is the nurse and you see them at the hospital and you see them at the doctor's office. You're not thinking, oh, they're consultants and they have to work with these companies that sell the stuff to the hospitals. Everything is, you know, clinic based when you're talking about a hospital or a doctor's office. And there's so many avenues, which I think is so important for kids these days to understand. It's not just a traditional, I'm a doctor or I'm a nurse, and that's all I can do with that if I like medicine. That's not the case.
Oh, yeah. And I was fascinated. I never did get one of these jobs, but I know I interviewed for a couple of them. I was fascinated with like being in the operating room and showing a doctor how to use a piece of equipment. Like they have internal staples and all kinds of things. And like those reps get to go in the OR and be next to the doctor and saying, hey, this is how you use it. Let me show you. I'm like, now that sounds cool. To be kind of in that level, kind of, you know, again, you're not as definitely on the level, you know, as the doctor for sure, but you're there as a consultant and to help them out. Like, I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And I did, like I said, I interviewed with a couple of companies and did not get one of those jobs. But yeah, it was cool as I discovered that there were other ways that I could use my nursing knowledge or be in that area and not be a pharmaceutical rep. Because it was kind of like, okay, if you're not doing this, like you're probably a drug rep. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, which is totally different also. Yeah, that's so cool. It's good that you knew that early on and you were already exploring those things. And I think kids these days are much more apt to be doing that. But sometimes we get siloed into this, I have to do this. And it's like, no, not necessarily. Those skills can be used. Our younger son's thinking about, he's going to study psychology. And I'm like, you don't have to be a therapist. He loves sports. I'm like, you can use psychology in sports. I'm like, you can use psychology in business. You can use psychology in training and learning. There's all these ways it can be applied, and it's not, you have to think outside the box. And we as a society, I think, are just getting so much better at teaching kids that. And even adults, you know, like it doesn't need to look just like this. You can have little pieces of things that use all your gifts and strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think, with like Shark Tank and all those kind of those shows. And then like, I know our high schools have like an incubator type of, I think that's what they called it, like an incubator type of course that you could take that kind of helps kids be introduced to that idea of an entrepreneurship, or you can have an idea and like, what can you do with that idea? It doesn't have to be something that, you know, dies in your garage kind of thing. You take that idea along a certain pathway. And that certainly wasn't introduced to us when we were growing up.
For sure.
Yeah.
So how did you get to, so now you're a retired nurse. And so how do you use your nursing with your podcast and wellness? Like, do you have another side business, or do you just tell me more about that?
Right. So I met the man that I married when I was in medical sales. I hired a gal to work in my territory, and he was a friend of hers. So it just worked that I got to know her and got to know him. And so, and we married and started to have kids, and I went back to work a little bit. And then we decided that I would stay home. And so I've gone on to have 4 kids. And when our oldest was 4 or 5 years old, he really just struggled to be a healthy kid. And I was a mom, in this suburban neighborhood here and doing all those things. And a friend of mine started to talk to me about maybe just some different things that I could do to help my son, and they were different than traditional nursing. So it felt a little uncomfortable. And just from very simply going to a chiropractor, or his soccer coach told me about a homeopath. And I was like, I don't know, that seems a little, but I just wanted my son to be a little healthier than he was. And so I started to look into some other ways of helping him with his health. And I fell upon a company that, makes and distributes health and wellness products. And I started to use those products with my son, as well as those other things. Went to the homeopath, we went to the chiropractor, we started to do some other type of things. I tweaked our diet some, changed the products that we used in our home to clean, and things improved tremendously with my son, to the point that he went on to play club hockey for pretty much his whole, school career, as well as through college and things like that. I started to get healthier. I just started to be introduced this idea of wellness, about building health as opposed to putting on a Band-Aid, which, and what I was excited about, because I loved, again, rehab nursing. And I soon learned in rehab nursing that, when you're working with people that, say, had a stroke, or they're paraplegic for whatever reason, we have to help them determine what their new normal is.
Yeah.
And most times it's less than 100%, right? And what I found with wellness is I started to realize that for myself and my family, and started to help some other people and just share those stories. Like I could help people create a new normal, but it was better than they had before. And I used to say, you can feel better every day by making these simple steps, taking these simple steps. And so I started to learn myself about that and get educated about this whole natural side of things, and learned about the industry, partnered with this company because it's been one of the longest standing companies out there in direct selling and health and wellness. I felt good about the products. I felt good about the science, which really resonated with me because I love that science. And so I just slowly, I didn't expect it, but I slowly started helping other people. And so I started to grow a little bit of a business by me being that consultant to those other people, helping them with their health. And now it's been 21 years that I've been doing that. And so I've not only helped people, like individual people like yourself, Julie, helping, or my friend Holly is a friend, and I've been helping her with some of her some things, but I also have a team. I started to say, well, maybe you could join my team. I could show you how to have your own business. You could stay at home and be a mom like me and have your family healthy. You could make some income and things like that. Yeah. So I now have this, a great team and a great business 21 years later. Just again, helping other people see how they can feel better every day and just create something different for themselves that's better than what they have.
I love that term you use, not just a new normal, a better normal. That's such a great way of looking at it, because everyone wants to get back to what they were doing before. But what if your new normal is better? You're going to feel better. You're going to look better. You're going to sound, whatever it is, be healthier. I love that. That's a great phrase. That's awesome. And then your podcast. So what do you do? So you talk about all these topics on your podcast?
Okay. Yeah. So podcast. So during this time, I have 3 boys and a girl, and our daughter, about 6 years ago, got diagnosed with a life-threatening mental health disorder, and has been struggling with that for the last 6 years, on and off. And I recovered from my own eating disorder in college, and That's what my daughter struggles with too, as well as some other mental health issues. And I really started to, well, during that time, all of that stress of those struggles around me really impacted my health. And I started to feel like I was juggling a lot of things,
Yeah.
my health included. And so I had to really get real about how I was going to take care of myself and be a little bit more specific about how to take care of myself under all this stress.
Yeah.
And I consulted some nutritionists. I just tweaked some things around and I started to feel better. And a couple of years later, then I just kept hearing, well, and I've been fairly open about not necessarily telling my daughter's story, but just kind of starting to talk about that and just bring the awareness to mental health, eating disorders, and things like that.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, well, maybe I should share instead of just on Facebook or things like that, but I should maybe start a podcast, and not again to say, okay, I'm the expert on eating disorders, but share from the space that I sit in.
Right.
I'm a mother who has a daughter, a child that struggles, and I feel out of control, and I feel like, what am I going to do? And I'm trying to help. And and just sharing what I've learned along the way is that I need to put myself in the front seat, and I need to put that oxygen mask on first and take care of myself. And then I said, I talked to so many people and they have stories. They have stories of recovery and hope. And I'm like, what if I did all of that in a podcast? And selfishly, I started a little bit for myself because I wanted to hear those stories. My daughter continues on her journey today and she's getting the help she needs, and it still continues. And so I thought, well, if I heard those stories and if I shared those with others, maybe I'd get a little more hope myself. And so that was my thought of starting a podcast a little over a year ago. And it's called Juggling the Chaos of Recovery, because again, I feel like I've been juggling a lot of, as moms,
Yeah.
and then a business owner, we juggle a lot of things. And then that other thing got thrown in with a child struggling. And so, that's what I do is I do have a wellness spot on there too, that I share occasional wellness things about, again, stories of people that have overcome certain challenges with their health, or I've interviewed Olympic athletes that, again, have weaponized their nutrition to really help them be the best Olympic athlete. But I really want to share about overcoming addictions, overcoming adversity, wellness, and just sharing that idea of hope that we can, again, have a better, if we share our stories, then we can inspire other people.
Yes.
Because I really believe that there is magic in our mess, the mess of our life sometimes, or in the juggling of, there's a message there that is okay to put out there.
I love that, magic in your mess. I love that. Good for you. All right. So what would you say to, and what do you say to your kids and people that you meet along the way that say, like, I want a career where I can use my strengths. I want a career where I can really love what I do. What do you say to those people to inspire them that they can have that? Or what do you say?
Yeah, I think that what I find with some kids these days, and I say this from some experience as a parent, is that sometimes and perhaps some of my own experience, they want it all figured out. They want to know that this is what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life. And what I've been continuing to tell my kids and others is that, you know what, just find something that you're happy with now, and be open to, and just look at today, what you're going to do and what you're happy with today. And it may not be forever, and that's okay. Like, just when I look at myself, like, I started out in nursing, and pretty soon I jumped into doing something else, and now I'm doing wellness, and now I'm a podcaster. I would have never imagined that. And that's okay, because I think when I tell people, it's like, I think as we grow and mature and have other experiences, we find other gifts and talents that we have. And so maybe sometimes that's why we shift careers and things like that, because we find a different part of ourselves that's a gift that can, be better served, being in another career or something like that. But really, I try to tell my kids, like, just pick something now, like something now that you're interested in, and work hard on that, and be open to other things that might come your way. Yes. Because they do, the other things come, and we don't have to be stuck in the same thing for the rest of your life. I think gone are those days that, like my uncle who's 90, he went to work for Phillips Petroleum and he worked there for his whole career.
Wow.
He probably left with a gold watch or something like
Right.
that. But that doesn't happen anymore. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you were a failure because you jumped careers. Our oldest son started out in sports management and now he's in logistics.
Yeah.
Great. It's working out fine.
Yeah. I love what you said about as we grow, we find more gifts. It's such another beautiful way of looking at it, instead of saying like, I've changed my mind, or I don't like that anymore. It's like, no, you're growing and you're going to find another gift, and you can remove that one, or that one helped you get to this one. So it's never it's never all for naught. It's just being open to that changing and knowing it's going to change, and we'll make it a little bit easier. Like you said, instead of having to figure it out. I mean, everyone would like that, a little bow wrapped around it and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. So then you have to do less work, you get less worry, less stress, all that other stuff. Everyone would like that. So when my kids are feeling, it's the same thing. Adults, we want it all figured out. We want to know what's happening. We want to know what to expect. But more than likely you're not going to. So all you can do is prepare to, the sooner you can get to that, I'm just going to be open to it and be more trusting about it, much less stress you'll have. I'm sure you'll agree. Well, it's a lot of learning, a lot of living to finally get to that place. But when you do, it's so nice.
It is. And I know that, again, and since we're the similar age, raised, like it kind of was like, okay, what are you going to be? Are you going to go to college and then meet somebody that you're going to marry? Are you going to be a teacher? Are you going to be a nurse? I mean, even for women, it was kind of like just certain things that perhaps that was what your future was going to look like. And I think our parents, I know my parents, it was kind of like they had that kind of maybe narrow view and raised us pretty conservatively. So I went off thinking like, okay, that's what I got to do. And, through trial and error and going through some struggles myself in kind of my self-image and just being comfortable in making decisions, and being introduced to other people and things like that, I started to be open to other opportunities and other possibilities. And that's what that's what I really like, because I have been then exposed to lots of other things, even from, again, nursing to wellness and everything in between, with all the different types of things that I've tried. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, I've been like, no, I think I won't do that.
And if someone would try to tell you, here's how it's all going to play out, and you could wrap it all up into a box, that wouldn't have made sense anyway. So even trying to get the result figured out while you're on the journey, would think would be less stressful. But if someone told you how it was going to end up, you'd be like, how's that all going to happen? What am I have to do to make that happen? So you're not responsible for the how, you're responsible for just keep continuing to go towards that thing that's drawing you, or you're feeling passionate about, or you're pulled to, whatever it is, because therein lies at least the next step, the next answer, the next something you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, it's hard for kids because they see us and they say, okay, well, you're doing this now. It's like, oh, well, I didn't just, like your uncle, start a job and then 25 years later, here I am. That's not as normal. I would say it happens, but it's not because you're not working hard, but it's like, that's less the norm. But even if it was, your uncle he didn't know he was going to start that job at 21 or whatever it was, and then be there for the rest of his life. If someone told him that, he probably would have been like, I'm not staying here,
Right.
And then people just do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that sometimes our kids, and perhaps me too, all of us, we look at all of the mistakes, and again, the struggles, and like, oh, that's just, look at that, I made this mistake, or I had to go to school another time, or I had to do this, or again, our daughter struggling. I mean, that's a major, thing in our life. Mm-hmm. And when I look back, I just really try to just look at the blessings, and what I've learned from that. And I had my mother just passed a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm kind of in this reflection time, because my husband encouraged me to speak at my mother's service, which I was so glad that he said that, and so glad that I did. And, I had a good relationship with my mother, a wonderful upbringing, but it wasn't smooth all the time. Sure. So sometimes when I think about my mom, I think about this, but I really took a week to really reflect on what she taught me. And in amongst, the high expectations and the strict rules, I really learned a lot of things. And so I honored her in that way by sharing those good things and kind of the silver lining. And so that's what I try to tell my kids these days and tell others is like, can we look at the good? Because again, I'm saying that because I learn that every day too, is that I sometimes tend to look at, well, look at this mistake and look at this and look at this. Well, how about you look at all the good that's happened and learn that those mistakes are just, so you just learn from that, right? And you just collect yourselves and maybe you learn that you're not going to do it that way again. And so then you move forward. And I share that because that's what I go through. That's what I've gone through and keep going through myself.
It's a great thing your husband did for you too, because it forced you to reflect, like you say, and write it down and think about those things and then put them on paper. You probably have it written down somewhere, which is a gift now. And you said them to everyone or however you wanted to do it. But it's an awesome gift because
I just recorded a podcast episode because I want to be able to hear it too. I have it recorded and I do have it written down, but I'm like, now that I have a podcast, I'm going to do, because people have followed that journey as they've listened to my episodes. I've talked about grief. I've talked to an end of life doula, coincidentally, which there was no coincidence that I happened to interview her. And so if they've been following my podcast, they've heard that my mother being put into hospice and being sick and him die. So I was like, I'm going to record it and I'll put it out. It's going out tomorrow for the episode so that I can have that too and share that with others.
That's why it's so important to be married to the right person. Because if you, whether you were married or not, like, or a friend, have someone in your life to say, you're going to look back and wish you would have done this, or I have a good idea for you, and for you to not, whether you were scared to do it or weren't really thinking of it. It's hard to be thinking clearly when that's happening, whether you're expecting or not when a parent dies. And then, you're obviously you're in a state of shock and all of that, but going back and having to focus on those good things puts you in a different mindset, right? In a different vibration. And now you're really appreciating it. And then you're feeling better. And then you're healing from that. And then other people are getting the gifts. So it's like, it just keeps giving and giving and
all of that. Right.
Yeah, right. And then to answer your question, can't we just focus? Can we look at the good? And the answer is yes. I think I might title this episode, Can We Look at the Good? Because the answer is always yes. There's always something good in anything. And we always could. It's just, are we choosing to look at it or not? So you need people like your parents and good friends and good spouses to say, like, let's change this up a little bit. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be sad, obviously, when your parent dies. But if you're looking at all the good, and someone had said it this way, my dad died several years ago, but it was like appreciating the fact that if you weren't sad that they died, that means you probably didn't have you weren't really close with them. So if you're sad, it means you had something good with them.
Right.
Right. Not that it's a gift to be sad, but it's like they meant something to you and you're sad about it. That means you wish they were still here. That means you had lots of good with them probably.
That's right. And that's exactly the episode that I recorded with this gal who has a wonderful business that I was attracted to. That's why I wanted to interview her. But again, as she talked her experience with grief, she said, we grieve so much because we've loved so much. Yeah. That same thing, when we grieve, when we're sad, it's because we loved them. Right. And so we can, and again, I loved that my husband gave me that nudge because I could honor my mother and I feel good about that. And I feel good about how things ended with her. And I was able to forgive. And, I learned that forgiveness isn't about the other person. And just everything you said, I was able to go through a lot of that week. And even just outside of something like that, like I, even just seeing the good, like I started taking ballroom dance lessons in the summer last year. And I ended up being encouraged to be in like one of those big competitions, like you get the sparkly dress and stuff like that. And it taught me so much. And we don't have, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but in the end, as I went through that competition and I did come home with a medal, my first time out and all that, but I was so wrapped up in all of the mistakes I made. When I put my leg on the other side of the tango, and I'd never done that in practice, I'm like, what is that?
Which I went known if they didn't know that dance.
No. And I went down and I did, and so I'm off and I'm, after the several dances that I did and I'm aggravated and my, coach and dance partner, he's like, can you just look at all the good you just did? Like, look at you compared to those women that I've coached, some of them. They've been dancing for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
You've been doing 6 months and
Yeah.
you did awesome.
Yeah.
And can you just look at the good? And I
Yeah.
was like, okay. But, and I did.
But yeah.
Yeah. But it's just, I tend to just go to that. But he also taught me that, I mean, dance is just a metaphor for life. That's what I'm learning. And that when we made mistakes, when I put my leg on the wrong side of him in the tango, he just corrected things and then we just went on. And isn't that what we're supposed to do in life? We make a mistake, we're like, oh, shouldn't do that again, and we just keep going. So you know,
yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor. You're right.
Yeah, it's been fascinating what I've learned. And our friend Holly knows that. She's followed my journey and we've talked about it many times. Like, I never expected, I just wanted to go have some fun. Like, come on, we're in the midst of a pandemic. I've had some struggles. Like, some friends have taken lessons there. I'll just go, maybe I can dance.
All right. Maybe I can. And it's always, I've been finding in my like more wise years that when you're saying, like, when you just go to do something for fun, that's almost always when you're most successful at it. When you're just like, whatever, I'm just going to go do it and see what happens. And well, that's when the magic happens, because you're not all wrapped up in it being perfect. You're like, well, I've never done this, so of course I'm not going to be perfect at it, and I'm just going for fun, which means I'm not going to be good at it. And then you just relax into it, and guess what? It becomes easier. It's because you're in that flow, and that's where all the good stuff happens. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and then the guy looks at you and says, by the way, have you been dancing before? I'm like, no. He says, you got a lot of potential. I'm like, yeah, you're probably saying that because you want me to
right. He says that's
lessons, right? But I think it's partly, and that was one of the things that I reflected on with my mother's passing. I mean, I wanted to start playing the piano when I was 5 because my sister was playing the piano. And even though the teacher said, oh, you're too young, my mom said, sure, you can do that. And so I love classical music. And like, now that I can dance the waltz and the foxtrot, I'm like, I can feel that. I'm like, I think that's why I can maybe follow the steps, because I have that appreciation for all of those waltzes and things that I played, you know, for many, many years.
Yes.
For many, many hours growing up.
Yeah, that's not an accident either. You're right. I used to play an instrument too, and I never put those two things together, but I loved dance and I was naturally good at it. But I guess you're right. You can hear, and that's probably why I appreciate music more to this day, because I know what goes on behind it and what it takes to learn those things and whatever. But that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has just been a fascinating conversation. What is there any? So you pick the one you want to. The last question you want to answer. What's one thing you wish you'd learned earlier in your life or career, or what's the greatest gift you offer the world each day? You pick.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that and was wondering how I would, but I think it's kind of what I wish I'd learned earlier, as well as what I think it's the same thing, is that it's okay to ask for help. You know, I was, again, raised by a very stoic English woman, and she just did it all. And I think that's great, because she taught me to be a strong woman who, I mean, people know that. I'm like, well, Moira does it, and maybe sometimes she asks questions later. You know, I just go and do it. So I think that's great. But I also didn't often ask for help, because I looked at asking for help as that I was a failure and that I was less than and I couldn't do it. And it doesn't always have to be that. There are certainly times that we have crisis and we really need the help. But there are plenty of times that I like to call it support now. Like, it's okay that, again, our mutual friend Holly, like, we love to go on walks together. We've traveled together with a couple other friends. Like, asking for help can be calling a girlfriend and saying, you know what, can we go for a walk? You know, I just need to get out of the house, or I'm going to go upstairs and take a bath, family. And unless you're bleeding, like, do not bother me, you know, and just those kind of things. And I wish I had learned that earlier. And that's really what I continue to tell people, is like, it's okay to ask for help. Like, it doesn't make you less than, and you still can be a strong, badass woman and all that, you know, but it's okay to ask for help, and you got to take care of yourself. You really have to put it's just that airplane thing, you know, you got to put the oxygen mask on first. I have learned that in my life, that I have got to take care of myself, and it's not selfish to do that. But when I take care of myself, and some of that's, again, asking for help, but when I put myself first and take care of myself, I show up better for myself, as well as my kids, my family, my business, my life. I got to do that. I learned that the hard way because it wasn't working so well for a while. And my friends encouraged me to go and, you know, get some help. And I did. And yeah, I think that's really what I want people to hear, is that, again, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to take care of yourself,
Yeah.
especially mom, entrepreneur, business owner. Like we give and give and do for everybody. We, you know what, we got to do for ourselves first,
Right.
you know?
And I think and I know when you're saying we, it's mostly women.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taught, I don't know, we're taught from our moms, we're taught from society. I'm not really sure. It comes from everywhere, but I know we're not taught that by our husbands. I'm certainly not. I was never taught, don't give yourself what you need, or feel guilty about taking time for yourself. He was always like, go do this, go do that. Why? Like we make up in our minds that someone else is going to judge us for it, or we can't do it because they won't be okay without whatever, or us going to take a bath for an hour. We do that to ourselves. I know
Mm-hmm.
our friends aren't telling us that it's bad, and our spouses usually aren't telling us that. We're our own worst enemy. And then if we could just like let that sink in. I'm glad you're teaching your daughter this too. I have sons, but especially the girls out there, like you're gonna have a better life. You're gonna have better relationships. You're gonna have a better career. You're gonna have better everything, and you're gonna be healthier in the end sooner, when you can learn that way sooner, because it's not selfish to put yourself first. It's necessary so that you can be the best of everything else. And like those are the people that break down or end up needing something, and they're desperate. It's because they weren't doing that. It's not usually because of the opposite.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And knowing kind of what I thought I knew what boundaries were, now I know more about, you know, setting boundaries for myself, you know, my, you know, just setting boundaries overall.
Yeah.
That's part of that whole self-care thing too.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, this has just been a great conversation. I wrote down so many awesome things you said. I can't wait for people to hear more about you and your lessons. And then if they want to get in touch with you, so do you have a blog? You have your podcast? Like if they want to work with you or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, I do. I'm in the midst of kind of changing my website around, and really adding the podcast and some other things in there. But they can find me at gorskywellness.com. My podcast is Juggling the Chaos of Recovery. So that's on, I host it on Podbean. It's on iTunes and Spotify, and you can find it a little bit on YouTube too. I don't do a whole lot there, but it does automatically post to that.
Oh.
You can find me on Instagram. A lot of people find me there. I'm Green Gorski, and they can leave me a message there. I'm certainly on Facebook, LinkedIn as Moira Gorski as well. So any of those social media channels, they can find me. And, you know, Julie, that's what I love to do, is connect with people and see how I can help them. I help a lot of women, and I say that I support women in mind, body, and spirit. You know, help them find their voice, take care of themselves, and know that their circumstances don't dictate who they are or who they can be. And so I just love to connect with people and then just see how we can support each other. If it's in health, if it's about coming on the podcast, if it's about introducing to ballroom dance, or go for a walk, or teach you how to make one of my favorite recipes or whatever. It's just that's what I love to do, is just connect and see how I think that's my nature, right? Nursing to what I'm doing now. Yeah. I love to help people, but I like to say, I love to support other people. How can I support you in what you're doing? How can we support each other?
Awesome. Yeah. It's all about connections. That's one of the chapters in my book, because it's a second chapter, because that really is what it's about. And I think too, as we get older, I know that this in the last probably 10 years, but really probably 5 years, like how important connections are, even if they're just for a few minutes, the connections they're making with people, and the words they're hearing. And, you know, I know that there'll be several, but there'll be at least one thing that every person's going to listen in this podcast and take something different away, and then go back and teach either their child or their team or their spouse or someone something else. That's what it's all about. So keep doing what you're doing. And
thank you
for doing it, because the more people that can be out there using their gifts and making the world a better place, the the quicker the whole world will get healed. So that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I just think and like, why not? Right. I mean, it's not too late to take care of your health. It's not too late to look at something different. Again, I haven't always thought that, but I totally believe it now, because it shouldn't matter how old we are or what's gone on in the past. Like, we can have a great life now.
Yes.
And so.
Love that. Great message. Thank you, Moira.
Thank you. You're welcome, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Take care. And you can find her at gorskywellness.com.
Right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks,
Take
Julie.
care. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can live their lives happily, doing work they love.